The sky turns unforgiving. It was a bright morning at JFK International Airport, with the usual hustle and bustle of travelers making their way through security and rushing to their gates. Among the crowd, one passenger stood out, not because of her appearance, but because of the quiet determination in her demeanor. Dr. Angela Carter, a well-respected high school teacher from Brooklyn, was traveling to San Diego to present a paper on equitable education practices at a national conference. Angela, in her late 30s, was a vision of professionalism. She wore a neatly pressed blazer over a light blouse, paired with comfortable slacks. Her natural curls framed her face, giving her an air of quiet authority. Teaching was her life's passion, and this trip was a chance to showcase years of dedication and hard work. With her carry-on bag slung over her shoulder, she navigated the terminal, excited about what lay ahead. The flight, however, was running behind schedule. Boarding was chaotic, with passengers jostling for overhead bin space and flight attendants trying to maintain order. Angela, carrying a small backpack and a laptop case, quietly found her seat, a window spot in the middle of the plane, and settled in. She smiled warmly at the man next to her, a middle-aged traveler engrossed in his phone. He nodded back, but quickly returned to his screen. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Angela adjusted her seat, trying to find a comfortable position. Her lower back ached, a lingering reminder of a car accident she had been in a few months ago. The injury wasn't severe, but long periods of sitting still aggravated the pain. She reached for the button to recline her seat, but found it stiff and unresponsive. Sighing, she pressed the call button for assistance. A flight attendant appeared moments later, a woman in her early 40s with a no-nonsense expression. Her name tag read Ms. Dillon. Her neatly tied bun and crisp uniform spoke of years of experience, but her eyes carried a sharp edge that made Angela feel slightly uneasy. "Can I help you?" Ms. Dillon asked in a clipped tone. "Yes, I'm having some trouble reclining my seat," Angela said politely. "Could you assist me, please? I have some back pain, and sitting upright for the whole flight might make it worse." Ms. Dillon gave a brief nod and leaned over to inspect the seat mechanism. She pressed the button a few times, but made no effort to adjust it manually. "It's stuck," she said flatly. "There's nothing I can do." Angela frowned. "Is there a way to reset it, or maybe you could check with maintenance? I'd really appreciate it." Ms. Dillon's demeanor hardened. "Ma'am, I've already checked. It's broken. There's nothing else to do." Angela was taken aback by the sharpness in her tone. "I understand, but is there any chance I could be moved to a different seat? I don't mean to be difficult. It's just that I have a medical issue." Ms. Dillon's face darkened. "You should have requested special accommodations when you booked the ticket. We're about to take off, and I don't have time for this." The words stung, but Angela held her composure. "I wasn't aware the seat was broken when I booked. I'm just asking for some assistance." What happened next was so unexpected that Angela barely registered it at first. Ms. Dillon, her face tight with anger, leaned in closer. "If you can't handle sitting here, maybe you shouldn't fly," she snapped. And then, in a moment of startling aggression, Ms. Dillon raised her hand and slapped Angela across the face. The cabin fell silent. The slap was sharp, echoing in the confined space of the plane. Passengers nearby turned their heads, their eyes wide with shock. Angela sat frozen, her hand instinctively reaching for her cheek. Her mind raced to process what had just happened. She had been struck, publicly, humiliatingly, without any provocation. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. Ms. Dillon, as if realizing what she had done, quickly straightened up, her face a mask of defiance rather than remorse. "It was an accident," she muttered, glancing around at the other passengers as if daring them to challenge her. But Angela wasn't one to stay silent in the face of injustice. She rose from her seat slowly, her voice calm but steady. "That was not an accident," she said, loud enough for those around her to hear, "and I will not tolerate being treated this way." Passengers began to murmur, their voices rising in concern and disbelief. A man across the aisle pulled out his phone, recording the scene. A young woman in the row behind Angela leaned forward. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Angela nodded, though her heart was pounding. "I'm fine," she said, though the stain on her cheek told a different story. She turned back to Ms. Dillon. "I want to speak to the captain." Now, Ms. Dillon's bravado wavered for a split second before she straightened her posture. "Ma'am, I think you're overreacting." Angela cut her off. "No, you assaulted me in front of these passengers, and I will not let this go." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some voicing their outrage, others too stunned to react. A young father in the row ahead turned to his wife and shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "She needs to be removed." Ms. Dillon opened her mouth to respond, but Angela was already making her way down the aisle toward the cockpit. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her head high. She refused to let this incident break her spirit. Reaching the cockpit door, she knocked firmly. After a few moments, the door opened, and the captain stepped out, a tall, gray-haired man with a no-nonsense expression. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, his voice steady. Angela took a deep breath. "Captain, one of your flight attendants just slapped me. I would like this matter addressed immediately." The captain's eyes widened briefly before he nodded. "Please come with me," he said, gesturing for Angela to follow him toward the front of the plane. Ms. Dillon, still standing near the galley, watched them with a tight-lipped expression, her arms crossed defensively. Back at the front of the plane, the captain called for a senior member of the crew to join them. Angela recounted the incident in a clear, unwavering voice, her professionalism shining through despite the emotional weight of the moment. The passengers who had witnessed the slap began speaking up, corroborating her story. The captain's expression grew darker with every word. Finally, he turned to Ms. Dillon. "Step off this plane," he said firmly. "Now." The murmurs in the cabin turned into applause as Ms. Dillon hesitated, her face pale. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself, realizing there was no winning this battle. With a final glare at Angela, she grabbed her bag and stormed down the aisle, disappearing through the aircraft's door. Angela exhaled a shaky breath as the tension began to ease. The passengers clapped, some calling out words of support. "Justice served," one man said. Another passenger reached out to touch Angela's arm. "You handled that with such grace," she said. Angela managed a small smile, though her cheeks still burned. The captain approached her once more, his tone softer now. "On behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for what happened. We'll be filing a full report, and you'll have our full support moving forward." As the plane finally took off, Angela leaned back in her seat, exhaustion washing over her. She didn't know what the next steps would be, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not let this moment define her, nor would she let it be swept under the rug. The story was far from over. The storm after the calm. The cabin felt eerily quiet after Ms. Dillon was escorted off the plane. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, whispers rippling through the rows. Though the tension seemed to ease slightly with the flight attendant's departure, the atmosphere remained charged with the weight of what had transpired. Angela Carter leaned back into her seat, her body trembling with residual adrenaline. She pressed her fingers lightly to her cheek, where the slap had landed. Though the physical pain was fading, the emotional sting lingered. The captain had promised a formal investigation and full accountability, but Angela knew the battle was just beginning. She wasn't one to seek conflict, but she also wasn't one to let injustice slide. Her thoughts raced as the plane ascended, the rhythmic hum of the engines doing little to quiet her mind. A tap on her shoulder startled her. She turned to see a young woman in the aisle seat across from her. Her kind eyes and soft smile were a welcome contrast to the events of the past hour. "Hi," the woman said hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, that was really brave of you, standing up for yourself like that. I'm so sorry you had to go through it." Angela nodded, managing a small, grateful smile. "Thank you." It was surreal, to say the least. The woman hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I recorded what happened. I don't know if you want to see it, but if you need it for anything, evidence or whatever, I'm happy to share it." Angela's breath caught. Of course, in the age of smartphones, someone would have recorded the incident. Her stomach churned at the thought of the footage spreading online. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite her unease. "I appreciate it, but I hope it doesn't get shared widely." The woman looked apologetic. "I hate to tell you this, but I think it's already out there. A few people in my row were posting about it as soon as it happened. By now, it's probably viral." Angela closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply. Viral. The word sent a shiver down her spine. She hadn't even landed yet, and the incident was already spinning out of her control. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Angela's phone buzzed incessantly in her lap. At first, she ignored it, hoping to delay the inevitable, but curiosity eventually got the better of her. Unlocking the device, she was met with a flood of notifications, text messages, emails, and social media alerts. Friends, colleagues, and even acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. The first message she opened was from her best friend, Maya. "Maya, Angie, are you okay? I just saw a video of what happened on the flight. I'm furious for you. Call me when you can." Angela's heart sank. She hadn't even had the chance to tell Maya what had happened, and already her friend knew more than she'd shared herself. She scrolled through the other messages, each one echoing Maya's concern and outrage. Her email inbox was no better. A flood of subject lines like, "Are you okay?" and "Saw the video. Call me," greeted her. Among them, an email from a reporter at a prominent news outlet stood out. Subject: Request for comment on flight incident. Message: Dear Ms. Carter, we've received footage of an altercation involving you and a flight attendant. We're preparing a story and would appreciate your side of the incident. Please let us know if you'd like to provide a statement. Angela stared at the email, her stomach churning. This wasn't just a viral video anymore. It was a news story, and she was the unwilling protagonist. Meanwhile, in the rows ahead, passengers were abuzz with speculation. A group of young travelers crowded around a tablet, rewatching the video and analyzing every detail. One of them, a tech-savvy college student named Raj, had already uploaded a detailed post about the incident on his social media. "Guys, this is wild," he said, showing his friends the comments flooding in beneath his post. "People are going off on the airline. Look at this one. Boycott the airline until they fire her. And this, hope the teacher sues them for every penny." His friend, a law student, leaned in. Honestly, she could have a solid case for assault and emotional distress. If the airline doesn't handle this right, they're in for a PR nightmare. Their voices, though hushed, carried through the cabin, adding to the mounting tension. Angela couldn't help but overhear fragments of their conversation, each word fueling her unease. The idea of legal action hadn't even crossed her mind yet. All she wanted was to attend her conference in peace. About halfway through the flight, the captain made another announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience and understanding as we address today's earlier incident. Upon arrival, airline representatives will be available to assist anyone with questions or concerns. We value your safety and satisfaction." The words were professional, but Angela couldn't help but feel they were hollow. No announcement could undo the humiliation she'd endured or the viral spectacle her life had become. As the plane continued its journey, Angela found herself approached by several passengers offering words of support. One elderly woman clasped her hand as she passed by, her voice kind but firm. "You handled that better than I would have, dear. Don't let anyone make you feel small." A businessman seated a few rows back leaned over as she passed his seat to stretch. "If you need legal representation, let me know. I have connections." Even the young woman seated across from her struck up a quiet conversation. sharing her outrage over the situation. Angela appreciated their kindness, but each interaction reminded her that she was now a public figure in a way she never wanted to be. As the flight neared its destination, Angela's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from her principal, Mr. Lawson. She hesitated before answering, knowing she couldn't avoid the conversation forever. "Angela," his deep voice greeted her. "Are you okay? I just saw the video." She sighed. "I'm as okay as I can be, given the circumstances." "This is outrageous," Mr. Lawson said, his tone indignant. "You're one of the best teachers in our district, and to be treated like that, it's unacceptable. Listen, if you need anything, legal help, media support, our school is behind you 100%. Angela felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That means a lot. I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of this." "Take your time," he said. "But when you're ready, let's talk about how we can turn this into something positive. You have a voice, Angela. Maybe it's time to use it." The words lingered in her mind long after the call ended. By the time the plane landed, the terminal was buzzing with activity. Angela's nerves spiked as she disembarked, her steps slow and measured. To her dismay, a small crowd had gathered near the gate, reporters, onlookers, and even airport staff, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. A representative from the airline approached her immediately, his suit crisp and his demeanor apologetic. "Ms. Carter, on behalf of the airline, we deeply regret the incident that occurred during your flight. We're committed to ensuring your concerns are addressed and will provide any assistance you need." Angela's jaw tightened. She didn't have the energy for corporate platitudes. "I'll need some time to decide how I want to proceed," she said firmly, brushing past him. But as she made her way through the terminal, the weight of the situation bore down on her. Camera flashes went off in her periphery. Reporters shouted questions, and strangers whispered as she passed. She was no longer just Angela Carter, the dedicated teacher from Brooklyn. She was now the face of a public scandal. Exhausted and overwhelmed, she finally reached the exit, where a private car arranged by the airline waited to take her to her hotel. As she slid into the back seat, she leaned her head against the window, her thoughts racing. This was no longer just about her. It was about standing up for dignity and respect, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been mistreated or silenced. She didn't know what her next steps would be, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let this incident define her. As the car pulled away from the airport, Angela stared out at the bustling city beyond. Somewhere out there, her story was spreading, sparking conversations and debates she couldn't yet fathom. The road ahead would be challenging, but Angela Carter wasn't one to back down. This was only the beginning. Voices of support and shadows of doubt. The city lights blurred past the car window as Angela Carter sat silently in the backseat, her mind churning with conflicting emotions. The slap was still vivid in her memory, not just the physical impact, but the sheer audacity of the act. She'd gone from being a humble schoolteacher traveling to a professional conference to an unwitting centerpiece of public discourse. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with yet another notification. Angela ignored it. She couldn't bear to read another comment or message. It wasn't just the overwhelming number of people reaching out. It was the realization that her story was no longer hers alone. Everyone had an opinion, and many of those opinions were being formed without knowing the full truth. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Rough day, huh?" Angela gave him a small, weary smile. "You could say that." He nodded knowingly. "I don't mean to pry, but I saw the video. That shouldn't have happened to you. Nobody deserves that." "Thank you," Angela said softly, her throat tightening. She hadn't expected a stranger's simple words to hit so deeply, but after hours of tension and scrutiny, the kindness felt like a lifeline. The rest of the drive passed in silence, and by the time the car pulled up to her hotel, Angela felt a small measure of relief. At least here, she could have a moment to breathe. Inside the hotel, The airline had arranged for a suite and a liaison to assist her with anything she needed. The representative, a young woman named Carla, met her in the lobby and guided her upstairs. "Miss Carter, I want to reiterate how deeply we regret what happened," Carla said as they walked. "We're conducting a full internal investigation, and I'm here to make sure you have everything you need during your stay." Angela nodded, appreciating the gesture but remaining guarded. "Thank you, Carla. Right now, I just need some quiet." Carla gave her a reassuring smile. "Of course. Here's my card. Call me anytime if you need anything." Once inside the room, Angela locked the door behind her and let out a long, shaky breath. The plush surroundings, the oversized bed, the luxurious bathroom, the stunning view of the city skyline did little to ease her unease. She dropped her bag onto the couch and sank into a chair by the window, staring out into the night. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, the caller ID caught her attention. "Maya." Angela answered, her voice breaking slightly. "Hey, Angie," Maya said, her voice filled with concern. "I've been trying to reach you all day. How are you holding up?" Angela exhaled slowly. "I don't even know, Maya. It's like my life has been turned upside down. One minute I'm on a plane, and the next, I'm the headline of every news outlet." "I saw the video," Maya said, her tone both empathetic and furious. "That woman, she had no right. No one should ever treat you like that." "It's not just the slap," Angela said quietly. "It's everything that's come after. The attention, the speculation, the comments. It's like I'm under a microscope." "Listen to me," Maya said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. People are on your side, Angie. Don't let the negativity get to you. And if you need me to fly out there, just say the word." Angela smiled faintly, touched by her friend's unwavering support. "Thanks, Maya. I'll let you know." After hanging up, Angela scrolled through her phone, bracing herself as she opened social media. The video had indeed gone viral, with millions of views and countless comments. Some were supportive, condemning the flight attendant's actions and calling for justice. Others, however, were less kind, accusing Angela of overreacting or even fabricating parts of the story. One comment in particular caught her eye. "This is what happens when people don't respect authority. There's always more to the story." Angela clenched her jaw, the words stinging more than she cared to admit. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, but she knew it would only fuel a fire. Instead, she closed the app and set her phone aside, determined to focus on the conference she'd come to attend. The next morning, Angela woke early, determined to regain some sense of normalcy. She dressed in a tailored navy suit and reviewed her presentation notes, hoping to shift her focus back to the work she was passionate about. As she prepared to leave for the conference center, there was a knock at her door. Angela opened it to find Carla standing there, looking apologetic. "Miss Carter, I wanted to let you know that there are reporters outside the hotel," Carla said. "We've arranged for a back entrance if you'd like to avoid them." Angela's heart sank. She hadn't anticipated the media frenzy following her this closely. "Thank you," she said. "I'd prefer to keep a low profile." Carla nodded. "I'll escort you out." Despite Carla's efforts, Angela couldn't escape the cameras entirely. As she exited through the hotel's rear entrance, a few persistent reporters managed to catch sight of her. They shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic blur. "Miss Carter, how do you feel about the airline's response so far? Do you plan to file a lawsuit? Have you heard from the flight attendant?" Angela kept her head down, walking quickly to the waiting car. Once inside, she let out a shaky breath, grateful for the brief respite. At the conference, Angela tried to focus on her presentation, but the incident on the plane loomed large in her mind. During a break, several attendees approached her, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "Angela, I saw the news. Are you okay?" one colleague asked. "It's terrible what happened to you," Another added, "If there's anything we can do to support you, let us know." Angela thanked them, but the constant reminders of the incident left her feeling emotionally drained. By the time the day ended, she was ready to retreat to the solitude of her hotel room. That evening, Angela received an unexpected email from a prominent civil rights organization. The subject line read, "Support and Solidarity. Dear Ms. Carter, we are deeply sorry to hear about the incident you experienced on your flight. Your story has resonated with many people, not just because of the injustice you faced, but because it highlights broader issues of systemic disrespect and discrimination. If you are willing, we would like to offer our support in addressing this matter publicly. Together, we can ensure that incidents like this are not ignored or repeated." Angela read the email twice, her emotions swirling. She hadn't considered aligning herself with an organization, but the idea of turning her experience into a platform for change intrigued her. Still, she hesitated. Did she have the strength to take on such a visible role? As the night wore on, Angela found herself reflecting on her journey. She'd spent years fighting for her students, advocating for equality and fairness in the classroom. Maybe this was just another fight, a bigger one, but a fight worth taking on. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Maya. "Maya, you've got this, Angie. You're stronger than you know." Angela smiled, her resolve hardening. She didn't ask for this spotlight, but maybe it was time to step into it. Not for herself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced or mistreated. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a chance to make a difference. Tomorrow, she decided, she would respond to the civil rights organization. Tomorrow, she would take the first step toward turning her pain into purpose. Turning pain into purpose. The next morning, Angela Carter woke with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt since the incident. The days since the slap had been a whirlwind of emotions: shock, anger, humiliation, but now a new feeling was emerging: resolve. If her story was going to be shared across the world, then she would control the narrative. She wasn't just a victim. She was a teacher, an advocate, and someone who had always fought for fairness and respect. Angela sat at the small desk in her hotel room, staring at her laptop. She had decided to respond to the email from the civil rights organization. It wasn't an easy decision. Stepping into the public eye meant inviting more scrutiny, but it also meant amplifying a message larger than herself. With a deep breath, she began to type, "Dear organization name, thank you for your kind words and for reaching out during this challenging time. The incident on the flight was deeply upsetting, but it has also opened my eyes to the power of sharing one's story. If working with your organization can help bring attention to the broader issues of disrespect and inequity faced by so many, then I'm willing to take that step. Please let me know how I can be of service. Warm regards, Angela Carter." As soon as she hit send, Angela felt a mix of relief and nervous anticipation. She didn't know exactly what this partnership would entail, but she was determined to make her experience count for something meaningful. A sudden shift in public perception. That afternoon, as Angela prepared for her next conference session, her phone buzzed incessantly. She ignored it at first, assuming it was more of the same: messages from friends or notifications about the viral video. But when the calls started coming in rapid succession, she realized something was different. The first call she answered was from her colleague, Sarah, a fellow educator who had stayed back in Brooklyn. "Angela." Sarah's voice was urgent. "Have you seen the news?" Angela's heart sank. "No, what now?" "There's a new video," Sarah said. "Someone uploaded footage from before the slap. It shows the flight attendant snapping at other passengers too. She wasn't just rude to you. She was on edge the whole time. People are saying this proves you didn't do anything wrong." Angela let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "I hadn't seen it. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, Angela quickly searched for the new video. Sure enough, it was already trending on multiple platforms. The footage, captured by a passenger sitting a few rows back, showed Ms. Dillon speaking sharply to a young mother, struggling to stow a diaper bag and later ignoring an elderly passenger who requested assistance with his seatbelt. The comments under the video were overwhelmingly supportive of Angela. This flight attendant clearly had a bad attitude from the start. Angela didn't deserve that slap. Why was she even allowed to work if she couldn't handle her job professionally? Good on Angela for standing up for herself. This is about more than just a slap. It's about basic human respect. Angela felt a swell of vindication. While she knew public opinion wasn't everything, it was reassuring to see that people were beginning to understand the full context of what had happened. An unexpected visitor. Later that evening, Angela received an unexpected knock on her hotel room door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after the swarm of reporters the previous day, she hesitated before answering. When she finally opened the door, she was surprised to see Carla, the airline representative, standing there with a man in a tailored suit. "Ms. Carter," Carla said, her tone unusually formal. "This is Mr. Reynolds, a senior executive from our corporate office. He's here to speak with you personally." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Is this about the investigation?" Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "It is. May we come in?" Angela gestured for them to enter, feeling her nerves spike. She wasn't sure what to expect from this visit, but she steeled herself for anything. Once seated, Mr. Reynolds began. "First, I want to offer our deepest apologies for what happened to you on our flight. The behavior of our employee, Ms. Dillon, was unacceptable and does not reflect the standards we strive for as an airline." Angela folded her arms. "I appreciate the apology, but an apology alone doesn't fix what happened. This wasn't just about me. It was about how your staff treated a paying customer with basic disrespect." Mr. Reynolds nodded, his face serious. "You're absolutely right, and we take full responsibility. That's why Ms. Dillon's employment has been terminated effective immediately. Additionally, we're implementing mandatory customer service and conflict resolution training for all our flight attendants." Angela's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected such swift action. "That's a start," she said cautiously. "But what about the passengers who were ignored or dismissed before me? What about the culture that allowed this to happen in the first place?" Mr. Reynolds hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her directness. Carla jumped in, her voice softer. "Ms. Carter, we understand your concerns, and that's part of why we're here. We'd like to offer you a settlement to help resolve this matter and to compensate you for the distress you've experienced." Angela's jaw tightened. "A settlement? Is that your way of sweeping this under the rug?" "No," Mr. Reynolds said quickly. "This isn't about silencing you. We genuinely want to make amends. But we also recognize that your story has gained significant public attention, and we want to ensure you feel supported as we work to address the broader issues this incident has highlighted." Angela considered his words carefully. While the offer was tempting, especially given the emotional toll the past few days had taken, she wasn't sure if she could accept it in good conscience. This wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I want to make something clear. I'm not just looking for personal compensation. I want to see real change." Mr. Reynolds nodded. "Understood. Please take your time, and let us know how you'd like to proceed." A growing movement. The next day, Angela met with representatives from the civil rights organization she had emailed. Their enthusiasm and support were palpable, and they immediately began discussing ways to amplify her story in a way that could inspire meaningful change. "This isn't just about one flight or one slap," said Jamila, the organization's director. "It's about the everyday indignities that people face, especially women and people of color, in spaces where they should feel safe and respected. Your story has the power to spark a broader conversation." Angela nodded. "I don't want this to just be about me. If we're going to do this, let's focus on the bigger picture, on creating a culture where respect is the standard, not the exception." Over the next few hours, they brainstormed ideas. A public statement from Angela, media interviews that framed the incident as part of a larger issue, and a campaign advocating for improved customer service training across industries. Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose as they worked. For the first time since the slap, she felt like she was reclaiming her narrative, not as a victim, but as an advocate for change. A new chapter. That evening, Angela sat in her hotel room, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The incident on the flight had been humiliating and painful, but it had also opened doors she never expected. She was no longer just Angela Carter, the teacher from Brooklyn. She was a voice for dignity and fairness, and she was determined to make that voice heard. As she drafted her public statement, she thought about her students back home. She thought about the lessons she always tried to impart: the importance of standing up for oneself, of fighting for what's right, and of turning adversity into opportunity. With those lessons in mind, she typed the final lines of her statement. What happened to me was unjust, but it wasn't unique. Too many people face mistreatment in their everyday lives and feel powerless to fight back. I hope my story inspires others to speak out, to demand respect, and to believe in the possibility of change. Together, we can create a world where dignity is not just a privilege but a right. Angela hit send, knowing that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time. A movement takes flight. Angela Carter stood before a podium in a brightly lit conference room, her heart pounding as she surveyed the packed audience. What had started as a simple work trip had turned into something much larger, a platform to speak out against injustice, disrespect, and the systemic issues that made stories like hers all too common. The civil rights organization had invited Angela to their headquarters to share her experience as part of a panel on dignity and accountability. The room was buzzing with energy, filled with activists, educators, journalists, and everyday people who had been moved by Angela's story. It had been just a week since the incident on the plane, but it felt like a lifetime. Angela took a deep breath and began. When I boarded that flight, I was just a teacher on her way to a conference. I didn't expect to be at the center of a public controversy or to become a symbol of something bigger than myself. But here I am, and I want to use this moment to talk about what really matters. Her voice grew steadier as she continued. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about a culture of disrespect and entitlement that we've allowed to fester in too many places. It's about the people who face mistreatment every day, whether it's on a plane, in the workplace, or walking down the street, and feel like they have no recourse. It's about dignity. The audience erupted into applause, and Angela felt a surge of confidence. She had always been passionate about teaching, about empowering her students to stand up for what was right. Now she was doing the same on a much larger scale, a growing support network. After the event, Angela was approached by dozens of people who wanted to share their own stories. An older man recounted how he'd been mistreated by customer service staff at an airport because of his accent. A young woman spoke tearfully about being dismissed by a boss after reporting harassment. Their stories were different, but the underlying theme was the same: a lack of basic respect. "You're giving us hope," the young woman said, clutching Angela's hand. "You're showing us that we don't have to stay silent." Angela nodded, feeling the weight of their words. She didn't take the responsibility lightly. Every story she heard reinforced her resolve to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for all the people who didn't have a platform. Corporate accountability. Meanwhile, the airline was working overtime to manage the fallout. The firing of the flight attendant had been their first public move, but it was clear that more was needed. The incident had sparked widespread outrage, with activists and customers calling for boycotts and demanding systemic changes. Angela had received another call from Mr. Reynolds, the senior executive who had visited her at the hotel. This time, he wanted to discuss a potential partnership. "Ms. Carter," he began, his tone carefully measured, "we understand that our initial response may not have addressed the full scope of the issue. We'd like to collaborate with you to develop new training programs for our staff. Your input would be invaluable." Angela was surprised but skeptical. "Why now?" she asked. "Is this about genuine change, or is it just damage control?" Mr. Reynolds hesitated before answering. "It's both," he admitted. "The public response has made it clear that we need to do better, and we want to show that we're committed to meaningful action. Your perspective as an educator and someone directly impacted by this incident would help us create a more respectful culture." Angela considered his words. She didn't fully trust the airline's motives, but the opportunity to influence real change was too important to dismiss. "If I agree to this, it has to be more than a PR move," she said firmly. "I want transparency, accountability, and a clear plan for implementation." "Understood," Mr. Reynolds said. "Let's set up a meeting to discuss the details." The power of social media. As Angela began working with the airline and the civil rights organization, her story continued to gain traction online. The second video, showing the flight attendant's rude behavior toward other passengers, had shifted public opinion even further in Angela's favor. Hashtags like #RespectInFlight and #DignityForAll began trending, sparking conversations about customer service, workplace culture, and implicit bias. Angela decided to embrace the attention, using her social media platforms to amplify her message. She posted a heartfelt video addressing the public for the first time, sitting in her modest Brooklyn apartment with her bookshelves in the background. "Hi, everyone," she began. "I want to thank you for all the support you've shown me over the past week. This has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but it's also been a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what's right. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a world where everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, is treated with dignity. I hope my story inspires you to speak up when you see injustice and to demand better from the systems that shape our lives." The video went viral within hours, shared by celebrities, activists, and everyday people. Angela's followers skyrocketed, and her inbox filled with messages of gratitude and encouragement. Backlash and resilience. Not everyone was supportive, of course. As Angela's story gained visibility, so did the backlash. Anonymous accounts accused her of seeking fame or exaggerating the incident for attention. Some questioned her motives, while others made thinly veiled racist remarks. At first, the negativity stung. Angela had always prided herself on her integrity, and the idea that anyone would question her truth was deeply upsetting. But as Maya reminded her during one of their late-night phone calls, the backlash was a sign that she was making an impact. "People push back when they're uncomfortable," Maya said. "You're challenging the status quo, and that's never easy. But don't let the noise drown out your voice." Angela took her friend's advice to heart. She began focusing on the positive feedback and the tangible changes her advocacy was helping to bring about. The civil rights organization had launched a petition calling for mandatory customer service training across the airline industry, which had already gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Angela's work with the airline was progressing, with plans for her to co-lead workshops on empathy and conflict resolution. Returning to the classroom. Amid all the chaos, Angela found solace in her work as a teacher. Returning to her classroom felt like coming home, a reminder of who she was and what she stood for. Her students, many of whom had seen the viral video, greeted her with enthusiasm. "Ms. Carter, you're famous," one student exclaimed. "Are you going to be on TV again?" Another asked. Angela smiled, her heart warming at their excitement. "Maybe," she said, "but what's more important is that I'm here with you, ready to learn and grow together." She used her experience as a teachable moment, discussing the importance of standing up for oneself and treating others with respect. Her students responded with thoughtful questions and insights, reminding her why she had chosen this profession in the first place. The ripple effect. As weeks turned into months, Angela's story continued to resonate. The airline's new training programs were implemented across their entire workforce, and other companies began following suit. The civil rights organization launched a campaign inspired by Angela's experience, focusing on dignity and accountability in public spaces. Angela, meanwhile, found herself in demand as a speaker and advocate. She balanced her teaching career with her growing role as a public figure, determined to use her platform to make a difference. One evening, as she sat at her desk grading papers, she received an email from a young woman who had been following her story. "Dear Ms. Carter, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. Your courage inspired me to speak up about the mistreatment I experienced at work, and because of that, real changes are happening in my office. You've shown me that one voice can make a difference. Thank you." Angela read the email twice, her eyes misting with tears. She had set out to be a teacher, to help others grow and thrive. And now, in a way she had never anticipated, she was doing exactly that, on a much larger scale. As she closed her laptop for the night, Angela felt a deep sense of purpose. The journey had been painful and unexpected, but it had also been transformative. She wasn't just a teacher or an advocate. She was a catalyst for change, proving that even in the face of adversity, dignity and respect could prevail. Legacy of change. Months had passed since Angela Carter's life was upended by a single slap on a turbulent flight. What began as a humiliating encounter had evolved into a powerful movement, with Angela at its heart. Her advocacy work had taken her from conference stages to television interviews, from classrooms to corporate boardrooms, as she championed respect and accountability in every corner of society. But today, she was back where it all began, at JFK International Airport. Angela stood at the departure gate, holding her carry-on bag tightly as she looked around at the bustling terminal. This time, the circumstances were different. She wasn't traveling alone. Beside her stood Jamila, the director of the civil rights organization that had supported Angela from the moment her story went public. They were flying to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress about the urgent need for federal standards on workplace accountability and customer service training. "Ironic, isn't it?" Jamila said, gesturing toward the gate. "We're boarding a plane again, after everything that happened." Angela chuckled softly. "I know, but this time, on Walking On with Purpose, a platform for progress." The congressional hearing was a culmination of months of hard work. Angela had helped draft a comprehensive proposal for a national framework that would require airlines, and eventually other industries, to implement mandatory training on empathy, conflict resolution, and implicit bias. The proposal also called for the creation of an independent oversight body to investigate reports of mistreatment. Angela's testimony was one of the most highly anticipated moments of the hearing. As she took her seat before the committee, flanked by Jamila and other advocates, she felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about her story. It was about changing the way people treated each other, one policy at a time. She began her testimony with a deep breath and steady conviction. "Members of Congress, my name is Angela Carter, and I am here not just as a victim of mistreatment, but as an advocate for dignity. My story is one of many. Every day, people across this country face disrespect, aggression, and outright discrimination in spaces where they should feel safe." Angela recounted the events of that fateful flight, pausing occasionally as emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She described the slap, the viral video, and the tidal wave of public support and backlash that followed. But most importantly, she emphasized the lessons she had learned along the way. "Respect is not optional," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "It is a fundamental human right. And if we, as a society, fail to demand accountability from those in positions of power, we allow disrespect to flourish." The room erupted in applause when she finished, and Angela felt a swell of pride. She had taken the pain of her experience and transformed it into a call to action that couldn't be ignored. An airline transformed. Back at the airline, Angela's influence was already making waves. The new training programs she had helped design were being rolled out across the company. Flight attendants, ground staff, and even executives were required to participate in workshops that focused on empathy, active listening, and cultural sensitivity. The results were tangible. Passenger satisfaction scores improved, and reports of conflicts on flights decreased significantly. Angela even received a handwritten note from one of the airline's senior trainers, thanking her for inspiring a shift in company culture. "We never realized how much we needed this," the note read. "Your courage has made us better." Though Angela had been skeptical of the airline's initial motives, she was proud of the progress they had made. Change, she had learned, often began with uncomfortable conversations. A hero at home. Despite her growing fame, Angela remained deeply connected to her roots. Her classroom in Brooklyn was still her sanctuary, a place where she could inspire the next generation. Her students followed her journey with awe, often peppering her with questions about her newfound activism. "Miss Carter, do you ever get nervous speaking in front of all those people?" one student asked during a free period. Angela smiled. "All the time. But I remind myself that it's not about me. It's about the message. When you believe in what you're saying, the nerves don't matter as much." Her students weren't the only ones who noticed her impact. The school district awarded Angela with the Educator of the Year title, recognizing not just her teaching excellence, but her advocacy work. At the ceremony, her principal, Mr. Lawson, gave a moving speech. "Angela Carter has shown us what it means to stand up for what's right," he said. "She is a role model not only for her students but for all of us." The ripple effect. As Angela's advocacy work expanded, so did its impact. The #RespectInFlight campaign she had helped launch grew into a broader movement for workplace dignity across industries. Employees from retail, healthcare, and hospitality began sharing their stories, inspired by Angela's courage. Major corporations took notice, with several adopting similar training programs to those Angela had helped develop for the airline. The changes weren't immediate or universal, but they were a step in the right direction. Angela often received messages from people who had been touched by her story. One particularly moving email came from a young flight attendant named Sophia. "Dear Miss Carter, I've been a flight attendant for 3 years, and it hasn't always been easy. Your story reminded me of the importance of treating every passenger with kindness, no matter how stressful the day is. Thank you for helping us all see the bigger picture." Angela replied with a heartfelt note of her own, encouraging Sophia to continue being a positive force in her workplace. A new chapter. 1 year after the incident, Angela stood on the stage of a national conference on leadership and equity. The theme of the event was Turning Adversity into Advocacy, and Angela was the keynote speaker. As she addressed the audience, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "A year ago, I was a passenger on a flight, just trying to get to a conference. I never imagined that a moment of disrespect would lead to all of this. But what I've learned is that our greatest challenges often hold the seeds of our greatest opportunities." Angela paused, scanning the room filled with people who believed in her message. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen alone. It takes all of us speaking up, standing together, and refusing to accept anything less than dignity for everyone. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, and Angela felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been painful and unexpected, but it had also been transformative. As the applause thundered around her, Angela smiled. She wasn't just a teacher or an advocate anymore. She was a change maker, proving that even in the face of adversity, one person could make a difference. And she wasn't done yet.